Emma stood in front of a mirror, staring at her reflection, a mix of frustration and hope simmering inside her. At 16, she was just another face in the crowd, blending into the background, unnoticed. She wasn't the girl who had the perfect hair or the fashionable clothes. She didn't have a large group of friends or a personality that could light up a room. She was the kind of girl who was always invisible at school, part of the walls, part of the furniture, never a subject of conversation, just an observer of the world around her. And it was a world where the loudest, the most confident, and the most beautiful always won. Emma didn't mind being invisible at first. It was easier that way. Being quiet and keeping her head down protected her from the judgment and harsh words that came from the popular crowd, especially from Lisa and her friends. Lisa, beautiful, confident, and endlessly cruel, was the queen of Eastwood High, and for reasons Emma could never understand, she had made it her personal mission to make Emma's life miserable. It started small, comments about Emma's clothes, her hair, the way she carried herself, and escalated into something more venomous as time went on. The ridicule had never stopped. Every hallway encounter, every gym class, and every lunch period had felt like a trial, a reminder that Emma wasn't good enough. The bullying had become her everyday reality, and she had learned to endure it, even if it meant retreating further into her shell. But something had changed recently. She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it started. Maybe it was that conversation she had overheard in the school library when two of her classmates had stood up for her in the hallways, or maybe it was the way her favorite artist's latest song had reminded her that she didn't have to be defined by the opinions of others. Whatever it was, Emma had started to see herself differently. She had always been the artist, the one who drew when she couldn't speak, who painted her feelings on the canvas instead of saying them aloud. Her sketchbook was a sanctuary, filled with images of worlds where she wasn't invisible, where she was strong, fearless, and capable of standing up for herself. It was a world she created because the real one never felt like it belonged to her. But little by little, she had started to realize that she could step into the world she had always dreamed of, the world where she didn't shrink into the background. As she adjusted her glasses and took one last look at her reflection, Emma made a decision. It wasn't going to happen overnight. She wasn't going to transform from the shy, introverted girl into a confident social butterfly with one simple act. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that she was going to try. For the first time, she was going to stop letting Lisa and the rest of the school dictate who she was. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not to herself, at least. And that, Emma realized, was the first step toward changing everything. It was the beginning of another school day at Eastwood High, and as usual, Emma found herself dreading every second of it. The familiar buzz of conversation echoed through the hallways, and students crowded the lockers, swapping stories and joking with friends. Emma shuffled through the crowd, her backpack heavy on her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the ground. She could already feel the familiar pound of dread in her stomach, the silent understanding that she was about to disappear into the background once again. But as she walked toward her locker, the atmosphere shifted. Lisa and her friends were waiting nearby, clustered in a tight group, their voices ringing out over the noise of the hallway. Emma tried to slip past them unnoticed, but it was too late. Lisa caught sight of her instantly, her sharp eyes locking onto Emma's with a predatory gleam. Well, if it isn't Miss Invisible," Lisa called out loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The comment was as casual as if she were commenting on the weather, but the edge in her tone made Emma's stomach tighten. "How's it feel to be the ghost in the hallways, Emma? You look like you've been dead for years." Laughter rippled through Lisa's friends. Emma's face flushed. She had been used to Lisa's taunts by now, but that didn't make them hurt any less. She tried to ignore it, tried to retreat into the protective shell she had built around herself, but Lisa was relentless. Lisa always found a way to make her feel small. "Seriously," Lisa continued, stepping closer. Do you really think anyone cares about you? Maybe you should stop hiding in the corners and actually talk to someone for once. Oh, wait, you don't know how to do that, do you? Emma stood frozen, her hands gripping the straps of her backpack as she stared at the floor. She didn't know how to respond. Lisa had a way of twisting the knife, making her feel like she was the problem, like everything wrong with her was her own fault. It was easier to stay silent, to just let the words pass by and hope they would stop. But they never did. Just when Emma thought she might slip away unnoticed, Lisa's voice rang out again, this time in a mockingly sweet tone. Oh, I almost forgot. The dance is this weekend, right? I don't suppose you'll be going, Emma. We both know you can't even talk to people without embarrassing yourself. The words hit Emma harder than she had anticipated. The school dance was the one event everyone at Eastwood High looked forward to, the one time of the year when the social ladder was more visible than ever, and everyone's status was on display for the entire school to see. And she knew exactly what Lisa was implying, that Emma, the quiet, awkward girl, didn't belong. She wasn't part of the social scene. She was nothing but a background character in a world full of people who knew how to play the game. Emma's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the sting of the insult, the weight of her own insecurities pressing down on her. It wasn't just about the dance, it was about everything. It was about the years of being ignored, of being the target of ridicule, and of silently accepting the role that everyone else had decided for her. But as the laughter around her continued, something inside Emma shifted. She felt it before she even realized what was happening, a spark of defiance, a flicker of something deep within her that refused to let Lisa control her any longer. No, Emma said quietly, her voice barely a whisper at first. But as the words escaped her lips, they felt stronger than they ever had before. I'm going to the dance. I'll be there. Lisa's eyes widened for a moment, her expression faltering. The laughter from her friends slowed, and a tense silence hung in the air. Lisa narrowed her eyes, clearly taken aback by Emma's unexpected response. You, she scoffed. You really think you can just waltz in and act like you belong? You don't have the guts, Emma. But Emma stood her ground. The years of taking Lisa's insults, of shrinking back into the corners, suddenly seemed far behind her. She wasn't the same girl anymore. I do have the guts, Emma said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. I don't need your permission to be part of the world I want to be in. Lisa opened her mouth to retort, but for once, she was at a loss for words. The rest of the hallway seemed to pause, as if waiting for the next move, and Emma could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her. For a moment, the world stood still, until the school bell rang, signaling the end of the passing period. Without another word, Emma turned on her heel and walked toward her next class. She didn't look back. The sound of Lisa and her friends' voices was drowned out by the hum of her thoughts. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but something inside her was awakening. She had done it. She had stood up to Lisa. She wasn't sure what had changed inside her, but in that moment, Emma realized that the control Lisa had over her emotions and her self-worth, was no longer absolute. The world hadn't collapsed because of her words. She hadn't fallen apart in front of the crowd. Instead, something had shifted. Emma had stepped into a new reality, a reality where she wasn't just surviving, but she was beginning to thrive. That afternoon, as she sat in her next class, Emma couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. She had challenged Lisa, and she had come out the other side standing taller. It wasn't a victory in the way she had imagined it, but it was a victory nonetheless. Emma was going to the dance. And she wasn't going to let anyone, especially Lisa, stop her from claiming her place. The next few days after the confrontation were a whirlwind for Emma. She couldn't quite believe what she had done, standing up to Lisa, declaring that she would attend the school dance. For years, she had allowed herself to be a bystander in her own life, letting the voices of others shape how she saw herself. But now, something had shifted. She wasn't invisible anymore. At least, not to herself. However, as much as she tried to convince herself that her decision was empowering, the days leading up to the dance were filled with doubts. The hallway interactions were still awkward. Lisa's cruel smile followed her wherever she went, and her friends snickered behind Emma's back. Every time she passed them in the halls, Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Was she making a huge mistake? Was she really ready to face the social world head-on, knowing she didn't fit in? But there was something else too, something unexpected. A part of her enjoyed the feeling of defiance. Each time Lisa shot a spiteful remark in her direction, Emma felt a little more solid in her resolve. She wasn't going to shrink anymore. She had been given a chance to define who she was on her own terms, and she wasn't about to let it slip away. One afternoon, as Emma was sitting in the library, flipping through a sketchbook filled with her drawings, she caught sight of her friend, Sarah. Sarah was someone Emma had known for a long time but had never really connected with outside of class. Sarah was sweet, quirky, and had a gentle soul, but she was also part of the social group that Emma always felt separated from. She rarely spoke up in the hallways or spoke out against Lisa's group, and Emma had always assumed that Sarah, too, had her own quiet place in the social hierarchy. "Hey, Emma," Sarah called out softly as she approached. "Can I sit with you?" Emma was taken aback but smiled as she made space for Sarah at her table. It had been a while since anyone had taken the initiative to approach her like this. Most of the time, Emma kept to herself, assuming that she was someone people just passed by. But here was Sarah, sitting down beside her without hesitation. "Of course," Emma said, tucking her pencil behind her ear. "What's up?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. I heard you're going to the dance this weekend." Emma blinked. She hadn't expected Sarah to bring it up. "Yeah. I am." "Wow, that's awesome," Sarah said, her voice laced with sincerity. "I've been thinking about going too, but I wasn't sure if I should. I'm not the kind of person who usually goes to those things." Emma tilted her head, curious. "Why not?" Sarah shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know. I always feel like I don't belong, like I don't fit in with the rest of the people there. I'm not popular or anything. And I'm not, like Lisa or Megan." Emma felt a sudden surge of empathy for Sarah. She had always assumed Sarah had it all together, always so composed, always so nice to everyone. But now, hearing her admit that she felt out of place at the dance too, Emma realized that maybe, just maybe, Sarah wasn't all that different from her after all. Emma said after a pause, "I feel the same way. I've never been to one of those dances before. And I'm not like Lisa, obviously." Sarah laughed, a nervous sound, but one that felt like a shared moment between them. "Well, I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one." For a moment, they both sat in silence, the weight of their insecurities hanging in the air between them. But instead of feeling heavy, the silence felt like a bond, a shared understanding. Sarah had been hiding too, just like Emma. She had her own set of fears, her own doubts about who she was and whether she was allowed to exist in the spaces where the popular kids reigned. But now, they were two quiet souls, finding solidarity in their awkwardness. "I think we should go together," Emma suggested, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Not because we have to, but because we want to. And because we don't have to answer to anyone." Sarah looked at her, a smile slowly forming. "You're right. Let's do it. Let's go and make it our night. Who cares what anyone else thinks?" For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a genuine excitement about the dance. It wasn't about proving anything to Lisa or anyone else, it was about doing something for herself, for the version of herself that she was finally beginning to understand. The idea of going to the dance with Sarah, of stepping out into a world that had always felt foreign, felt like the first real act of rebellion Emma had ever taken. Not against the world, but against the limits she had placed on herself. The next few days seemed to fly by. Emma spent hours looking for the perfect outfit, not something that would impress anyone, but something that would make her feel confident, comfortable, and strong. She found a simple black dress with a modern cut, something that wasn't too flashy but still made her feel good. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. For once, Emma wasn't dressing to hide herself, she was dressing to stand tall. When the night of the dance arrived, Emma stood in front of her mirror, her heart racing with excitement and nerves. Sarah had texted her earlier to confirm they would meet up at the event, and Emma was looking forward to it more than she had ever expected. She wasn't sure what would happen once she stepped into the gymnasium, filled with lights and music, but she knew she wasn't going to be that invisible girl anymore. Not tonight. As she arrived at the dance, the buzzing energy of the gymnasium overwhelmed her. Students were dancing, chatting, and laughing, their faces illuminated by the colorful lights flashing above. Emma felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety wash over her. She had never been in a space like this before, where the social structure of the school was on full display. But when she saw Sarah standing by the punch bowl, waving her over, Emma felt a surge of relief. She wasn't alone. Together, they walked into the crowd, heads held high, ready to claim a place for themselves. And for the first time, Emma felt like she belonged. Not because of the people around her or the music that pulsed in the air, but because she was no longer running from who she was. She was finally stepping into her own light. The gymnasium was alive with color and sound, the lights flashing in sync with the music as a swirl of students danced beneath the buzzing disco ball. Emma stood near the entrance, her palms slightly sweaty as she tried to adjust to the unfamiliar atmosphere. She had expected to feel out of place, but the reality was far more intense. The noise, the chatter, the laughter, it all felt so overwhelming. For a second, she hesitated, but then she remembered the words she had said to Sarah, "We are doing this for ourselves. We don't need anyone's approval." Her breath steadied, and she straightened her shoulders. This was her moment. She had made it this far, and there was no turning back now. "Hey!" Sarah called out from the far side of the room, waving frantically. "Over here." Emma smiled, grateful to see her friend. She pushed through the crowd, her eyes focused on Sarah, who was standing by the punch bowl, a drink in her hand, her face beaming with excitement. "You made it." Sarah grinned, giving Emma an enthusiastic hug when she arrived. "You look amazing." Emma looked down at her dress, the simple black fabric feeling more powerful than she had imagined. She had chosen it because it made her feel confident, and in that moment, it did. "Thanks," she said, her voice steadier than it had been in the last few days. "You too. I'm so glad you're here with me." "I wouldn't be here without you," Sarah laughed. "I was honestly too scared to come alone." Emma nodded. She understood the feeling. "Well, let's make the most of it. Tonight's ours, right?" Sarah raised her drink. "Right. Let's have fun." For the next hour, they mingled, laughed, and enjoyed the music. Emma was surprised at how quickly the anxiety began to fade. She wasn't just standing by the walls, hiding from the world anymore. She was dancing, talking to classmates, and even joking around with people she had never really spoken to before. It wasn't about fitting in or impressing anyone, it was just about being present, enjoying the moment, and embracing who she was in that space. But then, as the evening wore on, Emma felt a familiar chill run down her spine. The crowd around her seemed to shift, and she noticed Lisa, with her usual entourage, making her way toward the dance floor. Emma's stomach dropped. The sight of Lisa always triggered an automatic defense mechanism, a reflex that made her want to shrink into herself. But this time, she fought it. Lisa's eyes locked onto Emma from across the room. The smile on her face was cold and predatory, the kind of look that had always made Emma feel like an outsider. Lisa weaved through the crowd, her eyes never leaving Emma, until she was standing in front of her. Well, Lisa said, her voice dripping with condescension. I see you actually made it. Surprised you didn't chicken out like the last time. Emma's heart raced, but she stood firm, meeting Lisa's gaze without flinching. I didn't chicken out, she replied calmly, her voice steady. I decided I wasn't going to let you control my life anymore. Lisa raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. She had expected Emma to cower, to shrink back into the quiet girl she had always been. Instead, Emma was standing there, eyes steady, face unflinching. Wow, look at you, Lisa said, her voice taking on a mockingly sweet tone. I'm impressed. But don't get too comfortable, Emma. You're still not part of our world. You never will be. For a moment, Emma felt a wave of doubt rush over her. Was Lisa right? Could she really belong in a world that had always rejected her? Could she change who she was, or was she doomed to be the quiet, invisible girl forever? But then she remembered everything that had led her here, the long months of suffering, the small victories, the moments of courage she had discovered inside herself. She wasn't invisible anymore. Not to herself, not to Sarah, not to anyone. I don't need to be part of your world, Emma said, her voice clear and confident, because I've built my own. Lisa's eyes narrowed. She had never expected this version of Emma. She had expected the shy, timid girl who would back down. But now, Emma wasn't backing down. And Lisa didn't know how to respond. The silence between them hung for a moment, thick with tension. Finally, Lisa turned and walked away, her entourage following closely behind her. Emma didn't watch them go. She didn't need to. She had already won. The remainder of the evening was a blur of laughter, dancing, and moments of connection that Emma had never thought possible. As the night wore on, the music grew louder, the energy in the room more vibrant. Emma felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. She was no longer the girl who hid in the corners, afraid to be seen. She was standing tall in her own truth, dancing to a rhythm that was all her own. As the final song played, Sarah grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her into the center of the dance floor. This is our song, she shouted over the music, laughing. Emma couldn't help but smile, her heart swelling with a joy she hadn't known in a long time. Let's do this, Emma said, her voice full of excitement. And for the first time in her life, she danced without hesitation, without fear. It wasn't about fitting in. It was about being free, free from the judgment of others, free from the voice that had told her she wasn't enough. When the song finally ended, and the lights flickered on signaling the end of the dance, Emma felt a strange mix of exhaustion and elation. It had been a night of first. Of standing up for herself. Of discovering the strength she never knew she had. And it was only the beginning. As she walked out of the gym, Sarah by her side, Emma realized that the dance wasn't just an event she had attended. It had been a turning point, a moment when everything shifted. Lisa had tried to tear her down, to remind her of her place. But Emma had refused to let that happen. She had fought for her space. She had chosen to stand tall. And she wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not ever. The days following the dance felt like a whirlwind for Emma. The shift within her was undeniable. There had been a time when she would have second-guessed every interaction, every moment in the spotlight, convinced that someone like her had no right to be seen, no right to exist fully in the world around her. But something had changed. She wasn't just a bystander in her own life anymore. After the dance, Emma noticed people starting to look at her differently. It wasn't as if she had transformed overnight into the most popular girl at school, but there was a subtle shift. The usual dismissive glances and whispered comments from Lisa and her group seemed quieter, as if they had lost some of their sting. There were moments when Emma caught herself walking through the halls with her head a little higher, her back straighter, her confidence growing like a plant that had been given sunlight after too much darkness. Even the occasional nod from classmates who had once barely acknowledged her made her feel like she was beginning to carve out a space for herself. Emma wasn't going out of her way to make waves or force her way into conversations where she didn't belong. Instead, she was simply existing more comfortably in her own skin. One afternoon, as she sat in the cafeteria with Sarah, the topic of the dance came up once again. "You know," Sarah said, poking at her lunch, "I've never seen you so alive. You were amazing that night, Emma." Emma smiled, still feeling the afterglow of the dance. "I didn't think I had it in me," she admitted. "But I guess I did." "Yeah, you totally did," Sarah replied with a grin. "And the way you stood up to Lisa. That was epic." Emma chuckled, though the memory of that moment still made her heart race. "I don't know where that came from. But I wasn't going to let her make me feel small anymore. I was tired of hiding." "You were so brave," Sarah said, her voice full of admiration. "I think I was just tired of being afraid," Emma responded, her voice quieter now, but more resolute than ever. "Tired of letting other people define me." There was a moment of silence between them as they both reflected on the changes in their lives. Sarah had come to the dance with Emma, and though she had been more reserved, it was clear that the night had also sparked something inside her. Maybe it wasn't the same transformation Emma had undergone, but Sarah's quiet strength had been visible ever since. She wasn't just the girl on the sidelines anymore. She, too, had made a choice to be seen. Their conversation was interrupted when a familiar voice called out from across the cafeteria. Emma froze for a moment, unsure whether she had heard it correctly. But then, there it was again. "Hey, Emma." It was Megan, one of Lisa's closest friends. Emma felt a strange tightness in her chest. The last time she had interacted with anyone from Lisa's group, it had been filled with tension, a battle of egos that had almost felt like a fight for territory. But now, after everything that had happened, Emma realized she wasn't as intimidated as she once had been. Megan stood near their table, looking somewhat uncomfortable but not entirely unfriendly. "Oh, hey. Can we talk for a sec?" Emma glanced at Sarah, who gave her a subtle, reassuring nod. Emma didn't know what this conversation was going to be, but she wasn't going to shrink back from it. She straightened her back and met Megan's gaze. "Sure, what's up?" Megan hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I just wanted to say that, well, I've been thinking about what happened at the dance. You know, with Lisa and everything." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Okay. I don't agree with how she treated you," Megan continued, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "I know she's my friend, but I've been thinking. You didn't deserve that. And honestly, I respect that you stood up for yourself. Not many people would do that." Emma blinked, taken aback by Megan's words. She had always been part of Lisa's inner circle, laughing at Emma's expense like everyone else. To hear her say this now, was it genuine? Or was it just some sort of apology to get back in her good graces? "Thanks," Emma said carefully, not fully sure how to process it. "That means more than you know." Megan nodded. "I just think, well, maybe we've all been a bit too hard on you. And I'm sorry for that." For a long moment, Emma didn't know what to say. Was this the start of a real change? Was Lisa's group going to start seeing her differently? Or was this a one-off moment, an attempt to mend fences for the sake of appearances. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Megan had said it. And for the first time, Emma didn't feel like she was standing on the outside looking in. I appreciate it, Emma said finally, her voice calm but firm. But I'm not the same person I was before. I'm not just going to be quiet anymore, and I'm not going to let anyone make me feel less than. Megan gave her a small, acknowledging smile before stepping back. I get that. Just wanted to clear the air. As Megan left, Emma turned back to Sarah, who was watching her with an intrigued expression. Did that just happen? Sarah asked, wide-eyed. I think so, Emma replied with a small laugh. I didn't expect that. But you know what? I'm starting to realize that not everyone has to like me. I don't need their approval. I just need to be me. Sarah nodded, her smile wide and genuine. Exactly. You've come such a long way, Emma. Emma felt a warm flush spread through her chest. It wasn't just about the dance anymore. It wasn't about standing up to Lisa or proving a point. It was about the realization that she had the power to define her own narrative. The bullies, the doubters, they no longer had a hold on her. She could choose her own path, and for the first time in a long time, that path didn't feel so scary. As the weeks passed, Emma's world continued to evolve. The fallout from the dance had rippled through the school, but it wasn't the kind of ripple that signaled the end of something, it was the kind that hinted at the beginning of something new. People who had once only known Emma as the quiet, shy girl started to see her differently. She had become someone who spoke her mind, who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. And even though she hadn't become the center of attention, Emma didn't need that kind of validation anymore. What mattered now was the quiet confidence she had developed, the sense of peace that came from knowing she was enough, just as she was. There were still moments when Lisa tried to cast a shadow over Emma's newfound confidence, still snide comments here and there, but they no longer affected her the way they once had. Emma had learned that Lisa's cruelty came from a place of insecurity, a desperate attempt to maintain control over a world that didn't truly care about her. Emma no longer allowed herself to be a target of that energy. One day, as Emma sat in the library during lunch, reading her favorite book, she noticed a familiar face walking toward her. It was Megan again, this time without the entourage, her posture more relaxed, her face less guarded. Hey, Megan greeted, sitting down across from Emma. Got a minute? Emma closed her book and smiled, feeling a quiet warmth in her chest. Of course, what's up? I've been thinking, Megan began, biting her lip. About what you said the other day, at the cafeteria. How you're not going to let anyone make you feel less than. You were right. I think it's time I started doing that too. Emma raised an eyebrow, genuinely intrigued. What do you mean? Megan shrugged. I've been kind of a follower for a while now. Letting Lisa and the others tell me how to act, who to be. But after the way you stood up to her, I realized I don't want to be like that anymore. I want to be more like you. Emma blinked in surprise. Like me? Yeah, Megan said, her voice quieter now. You don't care what anyone thinks. You're not afraid to be yourself. And I admire that. Emma felt a strange, warm sense of pride welling up inside her. Megan, you don't have to be anyone else. You've got your own strength. I can see it. Megan smiled, a little shy but genuine. I know. I think I'm starting to see that too. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. For being you. Emma nodded, feeling the weight of the words settle deeply inside her. It wasn't about the dance, or about winning some social battle, it was about something much bigger. It was about authenticity, about being true to herself and not being afraid of what that truth might look like to others. That afternoon, Emma felt lighter than she had in a long time. The social dynamics at school were still as complicated as ever, but she no longer felt like an outsider. She wasn't trying to belong to anyone else's world. She was building her own world, one where she could be the person she had always wanted to be. As she walked home from school that day, her steps felt more purposeful, her path clearer. She wasn't looking back at the girl she had been, the quiet, uncertain one who let fear dictate her actions. She was walking forward, with a heart full of hope and a future that was hers to shape. She realized that it wasn't about the world accepting her, it was about accepting herself. Once she did that, everything else fell into place. The dance, the confrontation with Lisa, and all the moments in between had led her to this point of clarity. She wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to live her life. She was living it, on her own terms. Emma smiled to herself as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden light on the path ahead. She knew she had only begun to scratch the surface of who she could become. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the journey. She was ready for whatever came next.